Welcome to Right Here in Mass. We're a weekly podcast that features individuals throughout the Bay State who are on our radar and should be on yours. From the Berkshires to Boston, Cape Cod and the islands, tune in to learn about who you should know right here in Mass. Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is business leader, speaker, and author John Abrams, who's dedicated to transforming business into a force for good. After co-founding South Mountain Company and serving as its president for over 4 decades, he's now founded Abrams+Angell with his late-in-life partner, Kim Angell, to help small businesses increase effectiveness and achieve social, environmental, and financial goals. In June 2025, he released From Founder to Future, a business roadmap to impact, longevity, and employee ownership, which introduces the concept of CommonWealth Companies and provides a detailed guide on how to build and grow them. John, welcome to the show.
It is so great to be here, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here. And I would love to start off by having you share with our listeners more about yourself and what you do.
It's a long story. Um, so in 1973, after spending years in remote parts of Northern California, Oregon, British Columbia, and Vermont, where we gained a seat of the pants passion for design and building by fixing dilapidated old buildings and making new ones out of old barn parts. My partner Mitchell Posen and I started a woodworking shop in Rockland County on South Mountain Road. So we were asked to build a house on Martha's Vineyard. And in 1975, we came here. We figured we'd get this house built in 6 months and head back to Vermont or New York State with a pocket full of money. A year later, we were still toiling away on this handcrafted house. The money was all gone, but somebody else had asked us to build a house, so we stayed, and we had little experience. We had absolutely rudimentary skills and zero business knowledge. So, we kind of mixed what we had into a crude soup, and it would be decades before we figured out the recipe. And it's kind of the story of my career, learning new things in a half-baked way, just well enough to know how to hire people who could do those things better than I. But South Mountain thrived in its own peculiar way. And in 1986, when the company was 12 years old, my partner had moved on to farming, and 2 close friends, Ashley, who had been my employees since the beginning, said to me, "Hey, John, we've been talking. We don't want to take the usual route and go off and start our own business. We want to stay right here for our careers. But we need more of a stake, more than a wage." And I was touched, and I could have made them partners, but I thought if we do our jobs well, this will happen over and over. Maybe we can imagine a structure that would welcome committed employees to ownership over time.
Mhm.
And we were lucky. We stumbled on the worker co-op, so we didn't have to imagine. And at that time, there were barely a dozen in the US worker co-ops. And nearly all of those, by the way, are thriving today, 40 plus years later. I love that about it. But this conversion was scary. As the founder and the most deeply invested, I had the most to lose financially and emotionally. And the fear was that with distributed ownership and shared policy making, what if this thing that I loved became something that I no longer loved? But momentum carried us, and ultimately it just felt like a hinge point in the company's young history, an exciting path forward to the unknown. So on January 1, 1987, South Mountain became an employee-owned worker cooperative. And over time, it became clear that my fears were unfounded. I came to love it more. So that was really the beginning of an absolutely wonderful journey
Mhm.
that has taken me to this day. Um, in 2003, long after the distributed ownership, I took a 6 month sabbatical to experiment with distributed leadership and management and see how the company could do without me and to write a book. So we planned hard for my departure. After 6 months, just like that house, the book was not near completion. I mean, hey, what did I know about writing a book? The experiment had been a bit of a failure and morale had tanked. I mean, it was kind of an all-around mess. So I came back. We spent 6 months figuring out what did we do wrong and how to do it better. I left again, finished the book, and this time the system design got traction. And it's
Yeah.
held with adjustments to the present day. So there's more to tell, but maybe I'll stop there for now and see if you want to go in a different direction.
Yeah, one of the things that I would really love to highlight first is the worker co-op that you had converted South Mountain Company into. I have not yet to this date haven't have had any podcast guests who have done that with their companies. And so I think it's a really interesting idea and structure that potential business owners could consider. And so, for anyone who's listening to this episode who is a business owner and might be thinking about going down the worker co op route, what advice would you have for them for being able to do that successfully?
So, first of all, I would say, Ashley, that as time goes by, you will have other people who have done this because it is becoming more and more a more popular, even though it's still on the fringes, it's becoming a more popular entity of choice because today, right now, there are approximately 3 million American small businesses with employees, with founders over 55. And during the next 15, 20 years, something is going to happen to each of these. And they will transition. Trillions of dollars of assets will change hands. Some of those companies will be passed down in families. Many will unceremoniously close the doors when they can find no buyer, leaving holes on Main Street, making jobs lost. But many will be targeted by strategic buyers and today's rapacious private equity. And those companies may be absorbed, bundled, relocated, carved up, sold for parts, their mission and culture undone.
Mhm.
But what I'm finding is that many founders wish to preserve the values with which they began their business, but their advisors, their financial planners, their succession consultants, their business brokers, their accountants and attorneys know little of the employee ownership options available that can accomplish that. And the wonderful thing is that converting your company, selling your company to the employees that helped you build it can reward both you for your investment and them for helping build the business at the same time. So to me, it's just such an ideal arrangement. And the worker co-op is only one of several kinds of employee ownership.
Mhm. Yeah, and you brought up a great point there, especially with the story that you mentioned about the employees that you had who wanted to stay but wanted a little bit more. And if a company at the time might not have the flexibility to give more wages or even something else, it sounds like a worker co-op is a good fit for being able to reward the employees for all of their hard work and dedication.
Yeah, and that's exactly actually why I wrote my book that just came out From Founder to Future. Um, because my hope is it's a book that really explains the different kinds of employee ownership and how they work, but it also tells stories of exemplary companies in each realm. And my hope is that one or more of the methods and one or more of the stories will inspire each reader to say, hey, that sounds like me. That sounds like us. That sounds like the business we want to be. Sounds like our future. I'll take it. So that's what this book is for.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. And I also want to highlight too, Abrams and Angel, which you now own with your partner. And so I'd love to hear more about what you and Kim have built with that, and also maybe some background on why you decided to start that company.
So Abrams+Angell, when I was retiring, so let me just tell you a little bit about the arc of the journey through South Mountain. So in 2014, when I turned 65, we decided we better start thinking about the future of the company. And we started thinking about what happens tomorrow if I
Mhm.
got buried in an avalanche today. And we made this avalanche scenario. And that led to planning for next generation leadership after my retirement. 2019, we had a plan. We had identified a new CEO who had worked in the company for 20 years, Deirdre Bohan, and a leadership team. And we gave ourselves 3 years to build the leadership capacity that we knew that we needed to move to the next generation. And when I was getting near my retirement date, which was December 31st, 2022, I knew that I wanted to write a book about this subject, and I knew that I wanted to help other companies be convert to employee ownership. My partner Kim, who's an accountant, works with me sometimes on those projects, but mostly she helps people with their business efficacy, with taxes, and with estate planning. So we kind of work on parallel tracks, but we sometimes converge. So now I'm finding that there's a tremendous demand for these services. And when when we converted in 1987 to a worker co-op, there was nobody. There was no infrastructure. There was one organization, the Industrial Cooperatives Association, which is called the ICA Group today. Um, and we were lucky enough to find them, and they helped us make that conversion. But now there's a whole infrastructure devoted to this. And from writing this, from years of being involved in the employee ownership world, but particularly from writing this book and doing the research for the book, I have come to know most of these practitioners in the US. And so there are certain people that come to me, and I know that I can bring a unique kind of value to them. And those are the ones that I work on, and I guide them through the process. Um, but it's limited what I can do. And at the age of 76, I really don't want to build a business today. I just
Yeah.
want to do what I can do. And so I get great pleasure out of referring people out to other people who I think would will be a good match.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of my work.
hmm And you said something that was so good that I was like, I need to type this down to make sure to include it in the show notes. But it's the importance of thinking about what happens to your business tomorrow if something happens to your business today. And I thought that was such a good quote and an important reminder because I think sometimes as business owners, that's not always one of the things that we think about is if something happens to us, what happens to our business. We're just so focused on providing services to our clients or selling great products. But it is a real factor because you don't know what could happen today. And it's important to have that plan so that you are prepared. And especially your employees, too, if you have any, are prepared as well.
Um, so I think that's such an important thing. And and I always say to people when they say, "Well, when should we start succession planning?" And I say, "Right now, right now." Even if you're a very young business, um, it's always it's so important to figure out where are you going and how are you going to get there. And I another thing I that I advise people is that in the end, when the founder is ready to retire, you're going to have to change ownership somehow, and you're going to have to change the leadership somehow. But the two are quite different and they can be disentangled. And I advise people to do an early ownership change because that part is it's more transactional and less emotional and then leave a long runway to the leadership change so that you can build that internal capacity or hire from outside and onboard if you need to. So disentangling those two and starting on the process in mid-career rather than waiting till you're ready to retire and going, oh my God, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
Um, it should be a long, gradual planning process.
Yeah. And what are some things that, speaking of that, like having the long gradual planning process, what are some things that these business owners should be thinking about that are really important?
So I mean, all of us in business should be doing strategic planning and visioning and creating a vision of our business in 5 years, in 10 years, in 25 years. Um, so and if we know where we're going or where we intend to go, and certainly things will verge off one way or another at times, but if we have an intention of where we want to go and what our mission is, what our guiding principles are, and then we can follow that and think about that over time and each year make progress toward that goal and make sure to check in. Are we achieving our mission? Are we following our guiding principles? And sometimes you may not be. And then, well, should we be changing our guiding principles? Maybe. But keeping an eye, working on the business itself rather than always just be working in the business to produce what it does. This is such a hard thing for small business people to understand because they want to be productive. They want to be constantly getting things done and pushing things out the door. But we need to hunker down too and work on the nature of our business.
Yeah, that is a great reminder. Like almost, I think of it as like treating yourself as a client, making sure that you're giving the energy and time to your business so that you can think about these longer term conversations that might need to be happening or longer term planning that might need to be happening here.
Great point and great parallel. Yes, we need to be our own clients. And sometimes we need to get help with that too.
Hmm.
Uh, we don't have to we don't have to face all of this alone. There are people that can coach us, help us, train us, and making use of those resources from outside the company can be so rewarding and save us a lot of trouble because we all know that the way we learn is by making mistakes, but we don't have to make every mistake.
Yeah.
We can bypass a few of them, you know?
Yes, totally. And so, in addition to your expertise and passion for worker co-op conversions, what other things do you support business owners or your clients with through Abrams and Angel?
Um, Strategic planning, visioning, uh, coaching to some degree,
Hmm.
but at least my side of it is pretty much focused on these worker co-op conversions because that's my great passion, and I can be spending all of my time doing that. My other passion right now is getting the message of this book out, especially in these times, these extraordinary times, these extraordinarily difficult times. This is a message that can help to build local economies, to make strong. Um, Workers have been left behind
Hmm.
for the last. It's interesting to note that during the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, the unions were able to get great concessions and wage increases and benefits, and that helped to build a great, strong middle class in the US. And during the 70s, when that period ended, CEOs of corporations on average made 20 times what the lowest paid worker does. As that has climbed in extraordinary ways to 250 and 300 times, as wealth inequality has expanded dramatically, um, workers have been left behind in the last 50 years. If worker pay had grown at the same rate as CEO pay, today the minimum wage would be over $100 an hour.
Wow.
Isn't that something? So nothing
Yeah.
like that has happened. And an employee ownership is a way to bridge that gap and to
Hmm.
move in the direction of sharing the wealth more equitably and more widely.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it makes me wonder too, when companies are going through the process of converting into a worker co-op, what are some mistakes that you see them potentially making that they should be aware of or should avoid doing?
So, rather than I look more at not what they should avoid, but what they should be sure not what they should be sure to devote a tremendous amount of attention to.
Hmm.
And that, so first of all, it's not a do-it-yourself project. It's a complex um, transaction, and you should have great advice and great guidance. Um, and usually a co-op developer, somebody that does the kind of work that I do, we bring in an attorney, an accountant who's familiar with the co-op structure. And so working through it with a competent and experienced guide is number one. Number two is to make sure that you go through all the steps and engage the people. You're selling in this business to your employees. First of all, it has to be something that's worth buying. Yeah. So you have to make sure that your business is a great business to begin with. If you try to convert a crappy business that does not work well into a worker co-op, you will certainly get a crappy worker co-op too. What goes in comes out.
Yeah.
And so I think making sure that your business is worthy, and then finally engaging the employees who will be the buyers, who will be the owners in the process of planning the conversion.
Hmm. Yeah. And that makes me wonder, thinking about that, like what happens if a business owner wants to become or convert into a worker co-op, but they don't exactly have employees who want to buy into that? Like, have you ever run into that situation where a business really wants to make that conversion, but they just don't have the buy-in from their employees to make it happen?
Yeah, and but really what that generally indicates, Ashley, is not that they're not a good candidate to become an employee-owned business, but that they're not ready. So they might need 5 years to build an ownership culture within their company. And maybe they don't have employees who have been there long enough to have that great commitment. So sometimes it takes, and in fact, I've seen situations where an owner was, say, 60 years old and thinking, I want to be here for another 5 years. I'd like to convert this to an employee-owned business, but the business was not ready and the employees were not ready. And that owner had to adjust expectations and say, I'm willing to stay here for 10 years instead of 5 years to build um, the systems and the culture to make this a successful conversion. So I
Mhm.
think in any business you can do it, but you got to do all that hard work. And there's a great book by Bo Burlingham that has nothing to do with worker co-ops. It's called Finish Big, and it's about um, all of the steps that you must take in a small business to build it into something that will be the most valuable, so that as you come to your retirement and you want to sell the business, this is what's going to help you finish big and make that business very valuable. And those are all the exact same things that will make a good co-op.
Mhm. Yeah. And that is a great reminder, just something for people to remember is that just because your business may not be ready right now to become a worker co-op doesn't mean it will never be. It just might
Right.
involve having some extra time or extra energy or effort put into making it happen down the road.
Yeah, you might have to do some serious work on it.
Exactly. And so now I'd love to hear more about your book. I know you briefly mentioned what it's about, but if you want to give an overview that shares what From Founder to Future discusses or covers, I know you mentioned some stories that might inspire some people as they're reading it, but feel free to give us the overview of what it is.
So the book the book looks at the three main uh, forms of employee ownership.
Mhm.
In general, in the US, when you say employee owned, most people think of ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, because that is the most common kind of employee ownership in the US. So that's one of them. And I think it's the most expensive. It's the most difficult to maintain. It's the it really doesn't apply to very small companies. You have to be of a certain size, and the ESOP um, is is less likely to maintain mission and to engage employees in true ownership. But there are many incredible ESOPs, and I give some exemplary stories of like once again, Nut Butter and Revision Energy in Maine. There are a number of them. So there's the ESOP, and then there's the worker co-op, which is lesser known, and there are less of them. There are roughly 1,300 worker co-ops in the U.S. today. And then there's a much newer form here called the Employee Ownership Trust, which most employee owner companies in Britain are employee ownership trust, EOT. So there are these three kinds, and different ones appeal to different people, and everybody makes their own version. So the book really goes through all those, and then it talks too about some innovations in employee ownership today. The um, I mean, one of my favorite stories in the book is a guy named Eric Reiger who has a wonderful business called Webbit in Chicago, and he he talks about the interest of private equity in employee ownership today, which has been very much in the news. In general, I do not think it's a plus for employee ownership, except there are certain versions of it. And one of my favorite quotes in the book is from Eric, who says, talking about various friends talked to who sold to private equity. He says they took their seven-figure paychecks into a person they're all miserable. They sold their souls and their employees got the shaft. So this happens over and over again today. I call it the fat wallets and broken heart syndrome, where, where founders who really care about what they put heart and soul into for 30 or 40 years see it go down the tubes. So
Mm.
that's what we don't want. And what we do want, and what the book is supposed to encourage, is for people to see another path. And when it looks like the only thing to do is to sell to private equity or to a strategic buyer, here's another path.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, some of the stories, the the book is full of a ton of them, but I mean, here's one that I really love. Brett Tolley is a fisherman in Chatham, Mass, on Cape Cod, right near here. As he tells it, five of us were sitting around a living room in 2017, lamenting the state of the local fishery, the buyers who kept sinking prices, our limited ability to earn a decent livelihood doing the work that we love. And they considered setting prices among themselves and went to a local attorney who kind of chuckled and said, that would be price fixing. But, said he, they could engage in legal collusion if they organized a cooperative and everyone sold through the co-op. So by his knowledge, he changed the course of what they did. And Brett says, he says, everything centers around the fishermen. Our idea is to move fishermen from being price takers to price makers, to build a supply chain that has a fair price paid to the fishermen and a fair price offered to the local community. So the Chatham Harvest Cooperative offers fresh, local fish year-round through memberships in its community-supported fishery. And it's also begun to educate consumers about abundant, underused species. And Brett says, when people buy from us, they know who caught it, they know where the money's going, and that we are actively doing right by the ocean and the ecosystem. Our mission is to use fishing as a force for good. And I love that because my mission is business as a force for good.
Yeah, I love that too. And as we're going through this episode, we may end up having some listeners who maybe hadn't heard of a worker co-op before, and now they might be thinking to themselves, you know what? I think that might be something I want to consider. So if they are in that position where they're interested in learning more about it, what advice do you have for them for getting started and really being able to explore what it might look like for them?
So I would suggest that they go to my website, which is Abrams+Angell.com. And Angel has two L's. And they can see the book there and what people say about the book. They can order the book. Um, but there's a resource section on that website. And one thing it has is a 10-page pamphlet about the process of converting to a worker co-op. And they might want to explore that a little bit, examine it. And anybody who is interested in this, they are welcome to contact me anytime and let me know. And if people are interested in talking about their situation, I do a 1 hour free consultation anytime. And hopefully I can kind of set them on a good path.
And now for the last question I would love to ask you today, John. I always love to ask our guests what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'm curious to hear what yours might be.
So some of my favorite businesses, Ashley, are the local farms on Martha's Vineyard. They do such a great job and provide us with so much great fresh food, and the fisher people. So there is an organization called the Fishermen's Preservation Trust that I think is just a wonderful organization. And, all of our local businesses, but I also love it when people support companies that are B Corps, beneficial corporations. There are about 6,000 of them in the world, 8,000 actually. Um, Great thing to do is to go online and look for what you're looking for and a B Corp to provide that to you.
John, thank you so much again for coming on today's episode. I enjoyed chatting with you.
It was great to chat with you too, Ashley, and I love that you do it all in Massachusetts.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Right Here in Mass. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed recording it. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social media, and share our podcast with your network. See you next week.